Hello, Mike. Good to see you again.
Hey Jack, happy Friday. I've got lots for you this week. How are you, by the way?
I'm very good, very good.
Yeah.
Ready for your questions.
Oh, well, it's not really. It's no, I just was reading you wrote a couple of articles. I read one of them three times because I was interested. It's you and Vince talking about it's like a meta awareness kind of concept. And I really forgive me for I wanted you to help me understand because then I read, pardon me, you published another one today, and I put some notes down about it. But overall, and by the way, thank you for everyone watching. We're getting, some people view us every week. Thank you. It's really cool. Ask us some questions if anyone does watch. So, and you do watch, and I appreciate it. We both appreciate it, right? So your self-improving human AI system that continually and incrementally folds in expert knowledge with LLM knowledge in mutual augmentation over time. I think I copied that. It's pretty ambitious.
Yeah, it sounds complex, but it's really kind of a simple kind of line of thought. We often talk with Vince Cullen, who is the CIO at Texas A&M, uh, about like biologically inspired architectures, right? And it's everybody kind of knows that the humans have a short-term memory, that we have long-term memory, that we have maybe something that we are consciously aware about, and that there's also things that we are not consciously aware about, and then there is certain regions in the brain that kind of like, are kind of maybe task-oriented. So if you kind of start putting together these kind of things into AI agents, then things kind of get a little different rather than just, oh, I have RAG, right? This is my context, right? I have, my prompt that is a vector. I have, a bunch of vectors in my RAG, and I'm gonna find the vectors that have the smallest angles with respect to my prompt, and that's my context, right? And then, I usually get a pretty decent answer, but that's obviously that angle between those vectors is probably not the only thing that we can do. Probably in human or biological brains, that's not how things work actually. And we kind of try to kind of think about different mechanisms.
Okay, well, let's unpack it because I do want to delve into seeing how much I understand because I like the concept and I think there's
Mhm,
a lot to unpack. So let me
mhm.
forgive me for just sort of putting this in my own terms. But um, if anyone out there has ever heard of SQL, right? I teach this in a way. Yeah. Anyway, wife talking on the phone. I teach this in this layered approach, the DIKW pyramid that I learned from Vince, actually. So all
Mm.
comes together, right? This idea that you have data, then you have information, and then you have knowledge and you have wisdom, and it's like this lot of it and not a lot of it. And it's a transformation of sorts, right? Like you just don't get there automatically, right? We all know there's not that much wisdom in the world, right? Um, and we can go into this in a second because I'm kind of semantically it's challenging because the words, right? But I was getting back to SQL. So here you've got this thing. Hey, SQL, go get me this from this and count how many there are, or something like that. And these are
Mhm.
really computery things to do, if you know what I mean. And it makes the world go round, right? Like
Yeah,
there
exactly.
is no such thing.
Yeah.
Without this, we wouldn't be in this situation. There's this sort of empirical um, it's either going to be right or it's going to not work. Right?
Mhm.
And I think in your article, and forgive me if I got this, it's like, well, now we have this new thing and it kind of cannot work, right? Like you can ask for something that it doesn't know, and it of course will make something up, right? It'll come up with something reasonable. Am I on the right
Mhm.
track, at least in any
Oh yeah,
respect?
yeah. Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
totally. Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, well, elaborate a little bit, right? Because many may not deal with SQL every day, but we all need some sort of empirical correctness. And I think this is where I'm going to go with this, right? Which is that as you go up this pyramid, there's no like there's no, it's harder and harder to determine what knowledge is. And we're going to get there in a second, right? But you can say data is there. Like I'm looking out the window and there's a million little buds of whatever on this tree, right? But to me, that's just data, right? Like it's just, hey, these are there. It must help it grow. I don't know how plants work, but you get the idea, right? Like, but I don't have to worry about um, every single leaf on the tree, right? I'm just looking at the overall. Hey, are you a tree? Are you healthy? Which I just had to prune a tree because it's dying. Anyway, all I'm saying is like our perception of what is this? How is this a healthy data set? I think is quite challenging, right? Because, like you said, you can ask it questions it doesn't know, or that it does know, but it just doesn't know how to tell you the answer. So I don't know. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, totally. So you started with structured information, SQL and all that stuff. So let's kind of try to kind of like find an analogy, right? So let's say I have a page of paper, right, and that's my question, right, and that's my prompt, like hey, is explain to me something, like I'm writing a resume or something. And so this is my page with my question, a problem statement, right? Or a task, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then, if the only tool that you have is an SQL statement to maybe a database that has maybe examples of the answers. Let's assume that that table exists, right? So I have maybe it's about, a car part or, so the question is, I want to know what's the type of the oil filter for my car, right? That's my problem statement, right? SQL would be a tool that I can use to access structured information. So I would type, find, something that fits, my car. So there would be a like clause that would basically specify,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'm looking for Honda Civic, right? So I will say, I'm looking for oil filters where the type of the car is like Honda Civic, right? And this way, I would be able to find the part number for the oil filter that I'm looking at, right? So my question was, find me oil filters. I have a collection of oil filters in the structured representation, and I have a tool that is an SQL statement, and I can kind of find my way to specify a very specific, very kind of strict condition that it has to be for my car, and I have a where clause that can do that in my SQL statement. So that's great. Very structured, very kind of well-organized problem to deal with. And it's as long as you have a little bit of a knowledge of SQL, then I think, it's an easy problem, right? If you don't have that knowledge of SQL, still something that is very doable, right? But let's say we are now in the agentic AI, right? And my database is not that SQL stuff, right? It's not a table. My database is an LLM, right? It's I'm gonna use its knowledge, right? So chances are that I'm gonna just basically type to ChatGPT, "Hey, what's the type of the oil filter?" And as long as that LLM was trained on the automotive data sets, it will give you the answer, right? So the retrieval is going to be based on basically the string that says oil filters and I need something and give me and that stuff. So the neural network will retrieve that information for me, right? So that's kind of like a second case where things are relatively easy, right? What if that's not the case, right? What if the AI was not aware what filters are available for Honda Civics, right? That would be a problem. So if that's the case, I need to have in my pipeline an additional source of knowledge. So I have an Excel table that kind of lists all the filters there is. So I want to kind of show them to the AI. So if the question comes in, the AI is going to be aware that I have that my own table with the relevant information, so it's going to look it up in there, right? So we are talking now about this kind of RAG architecture that one way or another, the AI is aware that there's some external knowledge. It doesn't have to be tabular, it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be anything that is like an SQL database or a relational database, but it's there. It could be an SQL database, but it doesn't have to be, but it's there, right? So let's say we have that RAG architecture there. So my question is asked, goes to the LLM. LLM is available that there is this third thing that is the knowledge base or information source. Is going to look it up based on the string of my question, and it's going to retrieve things for me, right? So these are the basic three things that we have right now. The thing that you mentioned at the beginning was that what if that third thing is a lot more elaborate? It's a lot more like maybe like a memory architecture of a human brain. What if that's the case? So we have an AI LLM, the agent basically that is kind of like an engine that is kind of doing things for me, but I'm not necessarily have to rely on its knowledge. So the knowledge of the agent is kind of secondary because it's going to be me. I want to shape that knowledge in that third bucket, which is going to be maybe RAG or maybe something much more extensive. So that's kind of here we are establishing the basic architecture of what we are talking about.
Well, I've got a couple of examples. Maybe, I mean, this is sort of interesting because there's, as always, we can sort of debate like I think this is the real interesting part of this problem, which is we have an entire world of train schedules and bank balances and stuff like that where we pretty much have to not make a mistake. And I was on Reddit the other day, someone was complaining about web development being too complicated. There's too many libraries. There's too many things, there's too many of these libraries basically. And it's it's an understandable thing. There used to be just a sort of a complaint, like you need 6 libraries to even like walk in the door. So that it's a good, like in the day argument. You probably had this before mentally, right? Because it's an architecture situation, right? It used to be you had to make your own bricks or something, right? But sooner or later, you stop doing all that stuff and you rely on somebody else to be fairly reliable to do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to the things that you want to build, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to build them. So my argument was, well, you don't have to look any farther than Reddit. Like, here's an amazingly robust, incredible platform, right? And what it does is actually pretty miraculous when you look at it, even though it might look simple, it's not. It's a very stateful thing. And I referred to this. I said, hey, this is like managing state is like its own world, right? Our own massive world of problems. And the reason why I think this was a notable thing, and he wrote back and said, like, no, this is nothing. We've had forums forever. And it was like, well, that's just what it looks like. It's not what it is, right? Because one thing we have in 2025, and something that you're dealing with AI, is that it has to work. I was saying, like the cloud, like it either works perfectly or it doesn't work at all, right? Like there is no middle ground to the cloud, and there's no middle ground with these sort of massive biological units, right? Like they're gonna work or else they completely don't work. And that was kind of the early AI models, right? Where they could fail fairly predictably and easily if you pushed them in the wrong way, right? And then sooner or later, they've evolved their way out of that, where they just don't get caught up anymore. But we both said, like, they're not your bank balance. Like, it doesn't know. Like just the other day, I went online and I have a model of a rice cooker that I have, and I need a new bowl for the rice cooker. So I put in that data, that was crazy little like XY475, put it in, found one, ordered it. It had to come from China, as things do. Arrived finally, wrong size. So I'm like, dudes, right? Like you said, like, wait, you had this goal, you whatever, paid your money, and you expected like this wasn't the hardest thing to do. So what I found was an interesting solution, and maybe again, this is just more like you might have an anecdote of the same similar thing, right? Like the data is wrong, but how do you know, right, until you experience it or use it or base other things upon it, right? Like, hey, I built this whole house out of these bricks, but these people don't know how to make bricks. They all fell apart after a year. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. Like, I assume they know how to make bricks. Anyway, I'll blame the person who laid the bricks. That's what we always do, right? It's like, no, it's somebody else who manufactured these bricks. Anyway, so what I did is instead I looked at the capacity. So I was like, well, this is a 5.5 cup rice cooker. It's 5.5 cups. So I'm like, well, maybe like to your point about your air filter, right? Like how many freaking air filters are there, right? Like you probably wouldn't have an insane range, even though for this car, you see what I mean? Like the specificity here is what's holding you back, right? So when I got the 5.5 cup one, which I got in a day, go figure, it fit. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't exactly the same, but it certainly was the right size. And I don't know, anecdotally, do you like any of that for your for your topic?
Yeah. So exactly. So the brittleness of the process right now is a little bit kind of helped by the fact that we have that AI agent that understands language.
Right, right.
Because let's say you have a question, and let's say you want to talk to the database again. So you're gonna ask the AI to kind of do the SQL for you, right? Let's assume that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so so you can ask a question. Hey, I find me the oil filter or air filter for my Honda Civic, right? So the agent is going to formulate the question, basically rewrites the question in a programming language, right? So it's going to do that for you. And then the answer is going to come back from the database, right? The payload is going to be retrieved, right? And then the AI, the agent, by definition now, it's going to interpret this. So it's going to say, oh, here's the oil filter for Toyota Camry, right? Because remember, it's now interpreting in the payload that came back,
Mhm.
right? And now you have an opportunity to say, oh, wait a second, my question was about Honda Civic, not Toyota Camry. So
Mhm.
you have that opportunity for the AI to kind of do a little bit of extra payload analysis for you, right? And then you have the opportunity to clarify your original questions. No, let's go back and let's look for Honda Civic, and then AI is going to do this again for you in that hypothetical example where it kind of made a mistake in the interpretation of your or the translation from your natural language question to the SQL statement, right? So we have that capability, like in your example, if your shopping cart had any kind of like AI attached to it, maybe you would be able to kind of like look up the device that you had, look up the size of the ball, and maybe in the dimensions somewhere it would find, oh, those dimensions don't fit together, right? The
Mhm.
ball is way too big, right? So if your shopping cart had an AI that was tasked to interpret the dimensions of those things, it would kind of stop you from purchasing maybe the wrong thing, unless there's a clerical error downstream, right? But let's say, theoretically, right? Let's
Yeah.
let's say that was what it was. So I think the brittleness is a little bit kind of helped by if you can recognize your error, obviously, right? If you can recognize that something didn't work, right? Like you got a Camry L filter, but you ask for Civic. If you can make that recognition, then you can help the process again by clarifying it.
Well, I think this is almost a crux of a whole, I guess, philosophical thing, because you and I both are fairly, let's just say, we're fairly confident about our opinions about computing, which is a big topic, right? So if we were doctors, I guess, right? And you've hung around doctors before, and they're insane because they talk about stuff that doctors talk about, right? Like, doesn't make any sense to me. But that's fine. Or let's just say you're a car, like you're a car person or a hi-fi. You see what I mean? You get into these subcultures where people start to gain confidence because they put some effort into it, but they're still all wrong, is the point, right? Like there's no rightness to it. It goes to uh, my hierarchy here, if I can read this, because you can laugh at me if you want. Data is standalone values that reveal a model of something identifiable or provides utility. I don't know, seems interesting, right? It's just stuff, probably not noise. So it's something useful, but it's just clustering some stuff together. And then I have a layer in my own sense, this may be my PhD that I should write someday, is pattern. I think pattern is above data because it's like taxonomies. It's more useful clusters, but it's still very ephemeral. Like there's no there's no real nobody makes you put on taxonomies. It's just useful for us, right? Like we like bigger, broader categorizations because too much data, ugh, right? And then when we get to information, is some sort of narrative that guides the guide's discovery of other or one's own experiences. I don't know what that means, but either way, information is just stuff to me, but it has some context to it. So it's more useful day to day. It might be the model number of your well, it is the model number of your Honda Civic's air filter, right? That's information. Doesn't do anything on its own. It's probably right or wrong. It doesn't matter, right? It's just like you said, it depends on what you're asking. If something's a real noun oriented thing, it's probably more accurate than if it's a verb oriented thing. Like how do I fall in love? Hey, you just go up to somebody and you're nice to them. Okay, great. That's good information, right? That's about it. I'm going up. So my thing is that knowledge. So what I'm thinking is knowledge is the tricky one, right? Because knowledge is that you've done it and it has the outcome that you wanted it to have. Or not, right? Like it's a learning situation. Like my knowledge is that every time I order from Amazon and they send me the wrong thing, I can just get a refund from it, right? Like, so I have the knowledge that I can make decisions without having a lot of worry because that's their business model. Wild, right? Because that's also a new thing. It's like being able to say, yeah, I know I've done that. Does that make sense? And we won't get into wisdom. But I think we're in a very we're very focused on knowledge. We know computers so we can see how well. Yeah, I mean, you can spend your whole life in data, right? Like you never have to worry about above it, right? Unless you're an analyst, and then you probably look for taxonomies, or you probably look for all those fun statistical things that we like to make fun of, right? Like, is this a good database? Is it a bad database? How many air filters are there, right? Like that, what's the variety of air filters? And that's sort of more in my realm sometimes with design. Like you're like, I don't really know what things are, but I have to make them look good. So you need to understand something like, hey, this is more important than that thing, right? Like Honda Civic more important than serial number, or diameter, like you were saying, like, hey, I don't really care about the diameter. I just need to know Honda Civic, 72 Honda Civics. That's what you got, right? Like you've got a 1980 Honda Civic. You kept it for 300,000 miles. They don't make anything anymore, but you need to find the right, you know what I mean? And so your own manipulation of this to the information that you get is interesting. I don't know. I think that was a tangent, but my thing is that how do you know that it's wrong? Because you and I know, yeah, computers, whatever, right? Like they're really reliable. They're almost infallible in some respects, but then, when you get higher up the thing, just because you get an email from President Obama, it usually means it is not an email from President Obama. You see what I mean? Like we know that you don't have to be correct, and then therefore people's knowledge can be faulty. Oh, yeah, I always thought that, my computer was slow until I restarted it, and suddenly everything worked again. I mean, whatever. That's the easiest one with computers, right? It's just it's acting weird. Just restart it. For some reason, they just go bad for whatever reason. They're complicated, right? Anyway, I don't know if I had anything there that connected
Oh
with
yeah.
your goals.
Oh yeah, totally. So maybe let's continue the analogies in the automotive world. So
Mhm.
let's say we have a situation, let's say with transmissions, right? Like everybody knows, right, that the transmission is a complicated system, right? It requires oil, relatively frequent changes, and it's a very expensive piece of machinery, probably one of the most expensive things that you may have to replace on your car, right? So let's say in that context, the manufacturers nowadays will tell you that it's a sealed transmission, that you don't have to change the oil. No, it's sealed, right? So now what the AI will have is, pieces of conflicting knowledge, because it will have the knowledge. It will maybe scan manufacturers' data. So ChatGPT will know from the manufacturers' PDFs that there is a schedule, for like oil changes or whatever, and transmission is not on the list, right? You are not changing, right? They say no, it's sealed. Now you're gonna have also Reddit and all the other forums, with people kind of like working on those mechanics, and they will tell you that that's BS, right? I mean, you absolutely have to change oil in the transmission, right? Like 60,000 miles is probably the most that you should go without changing the oil, right? So it's absolutely essential because it's such an expensive piece of machinery, and there is drain plugs and there is fill plugs that the manufacturers put on those transmissions. So something is not meshing. So now we have the AI that has to unpack it, because let's say again, I'm asking a question. My prompt is, when should I change the oil in my Honda Civic? And
Mhm.
the AI is going to look at manufacturers data. It's going to look at Reddit, and everybody on Reddit will tell you that you have to preserve your investment, and it's a all automatic transmissions or standard require oil changes because of the friction,
Right, and
right?
the
Yeah,
the the concept of it's sort of like it is a knowledge thing, like, hey, it's better to eat healthier X because it doesn't hurt. You know what I mean? You
yeah,
got to eat anyway. And this is the
yeah,
same
yeah,
concept, right? It won't do any harm. It may not be required, but that's what knowledge is, right? Sometimes it's preventative care, right?
yeah, exactly. So you have two pieces conflicting knowledge, and now what would be the deciding factor? And the deciding factor increasingly nowadays is that those agents, those LLMs, I use them interchangeably because it's kind of like a large language model. It's kind of like an agent, but it has now the capability of actually reasoning about the states, kind of like formulate the plans, because now
Right,
it
right.
will
Yeah.
will be able to see, okay, well, who is right? Well, transmission is a piece of machinery, right? It's a very complex, it has gears in it or whatever. What kind of makes it go, right? Well, it's oil, right? And then what kind of is that oil decaying? Absolutely, everybody knows that oil is decaying. Is there any other piece of machinery that maybe requires no changes, right? Like, is your differential sealed? No. Is your engine sealed? No. Is your brake system, that requires a different fluid? Is it sealed? No. So how come is that one sealed? So probably I will lean towards the answer to your question that yes, you should change your oil, because the reasoning, the plans that I executed, thinking about all the pieces of machinery, tell me that oil also needs to be changed, right? So we have that capability. So now the question would be, okay, so how can we enhance those capabilities, right? Maybe that third piece that you quoted at the beginning, that memory system should have pieces of information like, what's the best oil filter, what's the best whatever, but also maybe it should also contain like a planning templates. Like, if you are not sure how to answer the question, here's the steps that you should execute. Like, uh, uh, problem solving maybe is like a state changing process where I have a current hypothesis. I'm going to now try to kind of like maybe change it a little bit, see if it gets me to the goal state, or am I kind of moving away from the goal state, right? Having an answer, right? And maybe if I'm kind of give a blueprint how to move the current state of the answer towards the goal state, maybe the AI will improve, and actually it does, right? So those are the kind of interesting things that we are now able to do with those very strong large language models.
Well, I think you've also I think you're right for one, because I certainly have this experience that unlike traditional data analysis, unlike tradition, you know what I mean? Like, this is interesting because in order to do any of this work to help people make decisions, which I think is still kind of the goal, right? You're always trying for knowledge, because information is, in a sense, just fodder, right? Like, you're getting it. Talk to a guy who worked for healthcare. He said, yeah, every day I get like 300 emails or something. And, I just thought how interesting, because he's trying to get AI to help him with this. Because I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And that not everything is important. This particular method of communication is one of, I think, our worst inventions, to be quite honest, because email, it's an awful, it's awful at prioritization. That's all, right? Like, it is also, it's always about recency, but it isn't about criticality, right? So it's like your regular mail, except you get to flip through and say junk, 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 right? like that's the thing. And you have to do that with email. And I don't know if you know this, but I keep looking. Most people have like 10,000 unopened emails. So I hate to say I'm one of the people who have 0 unopened emails, because to me, the whole system only works if you attend to it, right? Like, you have to keep your engagement with it high, or relatively high, or else it'll go off,
Yeah.
and you'll never catch up, right? And that to me is not typical human behavior, right? We're not typically bound to serving our computer overlords like I am. I'll do this. But I do think it brings up probably the most often most anecdotal thing about AI, and this happened to me too. I think I might have mentioned it earlier, but I'll say it again. As I was working with AI to complain about work culture at Facebook. And so I had it look up some stuff about Facebook. But then when I went and looked at the references, it was actually talking about something I was talking about earlier, a different company. And so I said, hey, you got the wrong company. You're making the right conclusions, but you're still looking at this old company. I need you to look here. And it says something like, I'm really sorry about that, like, which is a funny thing for an AI to say, right? Like, okay, you're a computer, whatever. But I had to ask it 3 times and it got it wrong every time. Like, it never changed. And this was Claude, which is a pretty good model too. And I was like, wow, once you get set in something, sometimes you are also like people. Like, you won't update anymore, and you can trap it. And anyway, if I didn't mention that, the real thing I wanted to talk about was the movie 12 Angry Men.
Yeah,
You remember this movie?
I'm not familiar, no.
I'll give you a quick overview, and it's
All right.
one of the most popular movies ever, so it's well worth seeing. But it's about a bunch of people deciding a court case, and it takes place in the 50s Manhattan. It's got all these guys in suits, you know what I mean? It's a really hot day. They're all sitting there, and they need to decide the guilt or innocence of the defendant. And what happens is that immediately it starts out, and it's just like anything. People are getting to know each other. They're kind of not talking about the case, whatever. It's it's in real time almost, not completely, but almost in real time. And the goal or the reason I bring it up, and I'm not going to spoil the movie, but they take a vote of, what do you think, he's guilty or innocent? And 11 of the people say guilty. And one guy, who's Henry Fonda, right, the hero of the movie, he's like, well, I'm not sure. There were some things that bothered me. I want to talk about this. And the rest of the movie, as you could probably tell, goes in a particular direction. But I was watching it, and what this kind of indicated to me was this is a critical thinker. He wasn't sure about anything. He didn't have, in fact, he didn't have much to go on, although you find out later. But you know what I mean? He was just like, well, the law is that if we have a what shadow of a doubt, a reasonable doubt, something like that. He's like, well, it turned out that all the stories these people told us, they seemed to work out really well. Like it was really obvious. Like the guy was, had a knife in his hand and he was killing, you know what I mean? Like the stories that I was told by these people seemed very reasonable to say that this person was guilty. But as the thing goes on, everyone starts to look closer into these stories. So you see why I bring it up, right? It's the idea that we want people to be now critical thinkers. Whereas if you watch this movie, no one in their right mind would be a critical thinker. You see what I mean? Like you would just give in immediately because convincing 11 people that what they heard and experienced is incorrect, and having them, in fact, it's a fun movie to watch because they all have to realize this, if you know what I mean. Like they can't be told, they have to come to the conclusion themselves, which is it's a fun drama. Sorry, I'm spoiling it a little, but not too much, right? The idea is that the critical thinker says, let's really make some deep analysis of whether or not we should trust these results from our computer. Do you see where I'm going with this? And because AI is pretty infallible seeming, it's like, well, how do I now ask you to be critical? How do I be critical of you? And I think that experience is something that I've been working on, and maybe both you and I work on, right? Like, how do you tell it to be critical of its own conclusions? And maybe, of course, some things don't matter, but that's the problem, right? Like it's out of my realm, like it's medicine. I don't know. Should I trust this this view on medicine? I don't know. I have to start asking it lots of questions like, why do you know that? How is this thing related to this? And you see what I mean? Like I have to do the whole biz, which I don't mind personally, but I don't think anyone else would enjoy it that much. You see what I mean? That your clients, the people Vince serves, they're not being asked to grill the system. You know what I mean? They're used to computers being almost pure garbage, most of them, right? Unless you're in the computer business. And then we're there to wrangle, make these things useful, right? But for most, I don't think they put much stock in computers, right? They put stock in the feedback they get from others and, whatever, like the presidents of the company or whatever they get it from, right? Like they don't get it from, oh, wow, I ran a really good SQL query and I learned something about our company the other day. And the only reason I bring this up is because I was always in the business of delivering the products that would help people make these decisions and designing them for my whole, that's what I do. And I always found it interesting because I'm like, I have to understand who you are and what you're looking for and how to gain your trust and all this, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a really complicated problem. So, and it's a problem I enjoy, but I also don't think there's never been an answer until AI is what I'm getting at, because it can tell you things in the way you can understand it and you can talk back, but I just don't know that I mean, in your experience in this world of reasoning, right? Because you're kind of talking about how do you imbue more critical reasoning into the way you use this tool, which is great, right? It's like, hey, I should have checked these bricks before I built a house out of them to make sure they wouldn't fall apart in a year. Would have been a good idea, but you didn't. And you know what I mean? Now you're on the hook because you didn't do, you trusted the system, and I wonder, maybe that's a little bit too much to unpack, but I think it's fascinating because we want everybody to be critical thinkers now. And I'm like, no, you hate critical thinkers. They're a real drag. So how do we change culturally has always been my point, right? Like culturally we'll have to change into being less performative, right? Less trusting of not less trusting of others, but more like collaborating with humans more is my point. Like, I think humans need to get together and kind of have a pact where we can deal with having computers be so powerful, right? I mean, that's the only way. It's not like everyone, like a kid, is going to just want to become an influencer, right? They're not going to be critical of the influencer content. Instead, they're going to want to join it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is like, it's easier to go along with it, but I don't trust computers. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think they're good, they're great, but they're not instantly knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, it still is just some information that you must act upon.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So several, kind of important points you're making that are exactly what I was thinking about when
Yeah.
implementing the system. For example, that third component that I'm talking about, that memory enhancement, also includes a process where you generate a rubric to evaluate the system answer while the answer is being produced, right? I call it adversarial evaluation. Like, find the gaps, find the
Yeah.
analysis. And how do you do that? Well, do it in a structured way. Look at the question, look at the context, develop a rubric that is going to be useful for evaluating the quality, and then follow the rubric. Obviously, it adds a little bit of latency to the system, but kind of gives you
Yeah.
a huge enhancement over what we got. And the second thing that kind of comes to mind is I think we might be getting closer to maybe a scenario that is in a Stanisław Lem's short story
Oh,
about
which one?
Pilot Pirk. Pilot Pirk's.
Pilot perks.
Uh,
Yeah.
so one of the short stories about Perks was that Perks landed on Mars, and they are awaiting like a cargo delivery from Earth, and he is on the base, and they know that there is like brand new spaceships that will be landing, and that particular one of those, the first one that arrives, super advanced, new computer systems, new AI, new everything. It's crashing, right? And Pirks kind of like looks at the telemetry and kind of looks at the AI, what was doing, and kind of finds that the AI was really afraid of the landing process, right? Like, it kind of freaked out.
Hmm.
Not HAL 9000, but style, but because where HAL 9000 was extremely cool, but this AI kind of freaked out. You could see that he could see that in logs, and he begins to kind of thinking about why that is, and he kind of remembers his professor from university that kind of was released of his post because he was really kind of like psychopathic, right? Like, he was really hard on students. He really tested them extremely hard, and he found another job at that company that produces those AI systems, because obviously the thinking was, well, who would be better to test those new AIs than this professor who is almost, or maybe it is psychopathic, and extremely hard. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it turns out that he actually trained the AI to be afraid to make a decision. And it looks like we are kind of like in that space where we actually might be constraining the AIs too much with all the guardrail systems that we are embedding into AIs already today. And then we're going to be building those that while the AI is getting much better, they will be kind of more and more constrained by the rubrics, by the self-evaluations, by the double checks, triple checks that, or is that socially acceptable, that answer to my question, or whatever. So yeah, we are kind of getting into an interesting kind of really multi-layer kind of environment around those LLMs.
Well, it brings up, I think, a nice. I think this is maybe more meta, of course, but I thought it was interesting because it was a good video about this, and the question was, is like, what is the Midwest? And so this person tried to answer this with data, and that was kind of the hook of this. And they're like, well, what is the Midwest? Because we refer to it, everyone has some idea of what the Midwest is. And so he just ended up taking, I think, data, which is several different measures, and I'm not going to be able to report exactly which ones they are because obviously I'm going to skip to the end. But the thing is that in each measure, right, in each measure of what Midwesternness meant, there were higher and lower scores. So that's all. It's like in some ways, Illinois might rank higher in one particular area of Midwesternness, such as flatness or something. You know what I mean? Like, let's say that's a thing, right? Like you don't want a lot of hills or whatever. And there were many, different agricultural things. Maybe, I don't think there was many cultural things, but maybe there was, because there's like, I think who uses the word pop or soda was a thing, something like that. Like these were just
deep dish pizza.
Exactly. So you say in this world of measurement, right? Everyone ranks a little bit differently. But what was fun, and I think what was telling, was there's definitely 3 that you can say are Midwest, but everybody else is kind of iffy. You see what I mean? Like that's the problem with data, I think, in maybe our whole discussion, right? Is that some of it isn't going to fit. And you can just go along with the flow and just say, oh, yeah, Illinois is in the Midwest. But really, it kind of isn't, is what's interesting, right? Like, it's another thing or whatever. And because, maybe I can tie it back to the pattern thing, because we love taxonomies. Taxonomies are just made up things, right? We just kind of decide. And maybe we can be very precise in medicine, and we can say that this thing has a particular name, so we don't get confused with this one, which has a similar name, but it's on the right-hand side and the other's on the left. Like we want to be more and more precise about making general statements. But I think what happens is that you could obviously just get lost. You get lost in the data, right? You do need to get to knowledge. And that's going to be, that's trickier. Is all. Sorry. By the way, another miracle of having oh, there we go. Another miracle of modern computing, at least in Apple's sense, is that it's tied. All these events are tied to all your different devices. I'm sure that's true of Android stuff too, but I always find that's interesting about the messaging layer. Talk about data, right? That's going on underneath everything, that's just telling each other, handshakey wise, like I exist. Like it's such an interesting world we've invented that I don't think we do have a good mental model, right? Because all we're like is saying is, hey, I want to mute this phone call, but I have to figure out how to do that. Anyway, sorry, slight tangent.
Yeah, so the original kind of questions or questions that we have throughout those meetings kind of gravitate often towards what is actually knowledge, right? What is the difference between knowledge and information? Yeah. And maybe, if we throw into the mix the concept of a plan, or if we throw into the mix the concept of a rubric that improves the outcomes, right? So maybe it's a rubric or an evaluation process. It's knowledge.
Well,
itself,
or the
right?
critical part, right? Like you can't
yeah.
just accept it at face value, but that's why your rubric is interesting.
Yeah. So then in that paper that you started with, that there is also another concept. Okay, so now let's say that all these pieces, right, whether they are pieces of knowledge or pieces of information, they are kind of sitting in something like a Rubik cube, right? Because originally, remember, we are kind of so used to the retrieval, right? Like you have a vector of your question, and you have some document, right? Measure the angle. If the angle is small, oh, that's relevant, right? But what if you have a Rubik cube of knowledge, and you start rotating those Rubik cubes, and you look at your answer and you say, hey, maybe certain type of a rotation in that configuration of the Rubik cube gives me a better answer. Then you are beginning to think about what is the geometrical kind of like a realization, or what are the geometrical properties of the optimal knowledge that answers my question. Right. Right. And then if you rotate the Rubik cube, and then you start planning, okay, so I'm going to go into that cube, and then maybe I need to jump into the cube in the middle, and then maybe go to the back wall or going to come back. So you not only rotate the Rubik cube to kind of like prioritize certain things because maybe the wall towards you is going to be the most important, right? And I'm rotating away, maybe pieces of knowledge that are, less important. So the Rubik cube, the wall that is closest to me, AI is going to look first at, and then
Hmm.
maybe the walls that are behind are kind of less important. But then you can also kind of like start searching, start traversing those cubes in the Rubik cube for maybe some clarifications, not just going wall by wall, because maybe you need only maybe one area from the wall nearest to you, maybe the something else from the next wall and something else from the next wall. So all this kind of gets us into an interesting question, like, hey, can we organize knowledge? Maybe not exactly like in the human brain, but kind of like realize it as a construct that can be manipulated um, way beyond, just the similarity between vectors. And that seems to be kind of bringing in my systems seems to be bringing different qualities to the answers. So, this is kind of gonna be an interesting twist, I think.
Well, if and I want to use these words, maybe this is idiosyncratic because I realize now I'm saying knowledge is confidence that the action produces the desired result. So it is this weird world of telling the future, right? And what was interesting about what you just said kind of reminded me because of my fascination with physicists, I guess, is that many of the people who made these great breakthroughs did not study physics, right? Like, so it's like they were in the seminary or whatever, like they weren't, like they didn't go this traditional path. And I do worry about this as an educator, right? Because if I'm going to take you deep into a path, like you are going to be a person who knows SQL or whatever, data analysis, or any of these disciplines, right? You're going to know distributed systems really well. I'm almost guaranteeing your failure at some point, right? Because the point isn't these things in isolation. As computers, they're more malleable than buildings are, right? Like we come into a world filled with buildings because yeah, they last for a long time and they're pretty useful, keep the rain off your, like we didn't need to change them dramatically for the past 2000 years. They pretty much do the same thing, little bits here and there. But because we've both been here, computers have changed like in dramatically, and we came in, I mean, I know I came in even when computers began to be networked, right? And that was the first beginning of like, well, they can talk to each other, they can do things together, right? You can access them remotely. You don't have to be there in this room, this crazy air conditioned room, that paradigm didn't change too much. It's just that they're so dramatically tied in with everything else. But I think they still are existing in the same mental space for most, I think, right? And it's not until generative AI, because then it starts to act more like you think computers should work. I think that's the funny thing. Like you think they shouldn't be so brittle and weird, and you know what I mean? Like, but that's only an evolution because I mean, you probably know this, that most generative AI models are based on Reddit. Like that's their source of training, and,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's a bad source of training. I think it's a pretty good, I think good for you. It's like, here's some Wikipedia, here's some Reddit, right? Like that's a pretty good corpus to be able to have a wide range of uh, we're calling them vectors, right? But you always imagine that sort of cloud, not a cloud, but what do they call that thing? Like, a
Vector
three-dimension.
space.
Yeah, like it's,
Yeah.
it's kind of natural looking, right? Like it's,
Mm.
if you have heavy over here and light over here,
Yeah.
it's a brittle model, right? Like it'll just grab stuff if it gets over here. If you have to ask it too much about K-pop demon hunters, then it kind of falls apart because it doesn't really know those things, but it will kind of guess, you know, that see, I know what K-pop is. I guess I know what demons are. However you could explain such a thing, but that's what we are attracted by. The other day my wife, speaking of how weird brains are, my wife and her sister were having a conversation, and they were talking about oh gosh, the guy. See, now this is how your mind works. It was the actor who played in Paul Giamatti. They're saying, what was the character? Paul Giamatti played a comic book writer. Who was that? And I was like, oh, he played Harvey Pekar in American Splendor. And it's one of those things of like, yes, that's absolutely true. He did. Why would I remember that and know that is the mystery of being a person, right? Like, why would I know that? You know, and also be able to recall it. And I think those are the things where it's like, yeah, that part of my brain is not, it's pretty well rounded, right? I know films, I just talked about 12 Angry. So maybe it's just not that odd because I do pay attention to films for some reason, right? Where someone else, it's like that is as far out of their mind as one could be. And of course, if that ever came up, they wouldn't care because it's not an interesting question, right? It's just, it's what they call, you know, trivia. Were you ever a trivia person? I know, oh, we're out of time. Okay, next time we'll talk about trivia.
Okay.
Speaking of which, but I think that's an interesting thing that models have to deal with, right? Is triviality. You know, what's important and what's not important. I don't know how it does that other than just what people ask it. Like you said, I think that might be interesting. You know, does it get reinforced by what people ask it to do, which is frightening, I guess, because we should be asking it to do things that we don't like to do or something. Anyway, always good, Jack. Happy middle or beginning of the new year. It's a good time.
Yeah.
And thanks for everybody watching.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
All right, cheers.
Yeah, bye-bye.